I'm Howard Wong. I'm an architect by profession and a member of a citizens transportation advocacy group called SaveMuni.com. We were formed in response initially to the Central Subway project, which we opposed, but have become a much more broader uh, transit improvement uh, group, which consists of many transportation advocacy groups in the Bay Area, and we have alliances with the Sierra Club, many neighborhood organizations, the San Francisco Coalition of Neighborhood for Neighborhoods. But speaking to what Steve was talking about what is the difference between what benefits people as a whole, the citizenry as a whole, versus what is benefiting the few, is one of the issues of the Central Subway that ties into the subject here today. One of the interesting things about transit in San Francisco is that if you look at a typical Muni transportation map showing where ridership starts and begins, is that you start to see the density of uses is mainly in the Market Street corridor. So the large green areas are where most Muni riders go to and originate from. But yet, the Central Subway project, which is a 1.7-mile segment of the system, which goes from 4th and Brannan to Washington and Stockton Street in Chinatown, and will cost $1.6 billion, has very few new ridership and is considered by many often termed a boondoggle. But how does a boondoggle originate? In 1989, after the Loma Prieta earthquake, there were very serious political ramifications for politicians who supported the demolition of the Embarcadero Freeway. Chinatown merchants and residents felt the freeway was very important to their business lives. This subsequently in 2005 was proven to be incorrect when the Mayor's Office of Economic Development found through a economic study, that Chinatown's main economic slowdown, which was mild compared to many other parts of the city, rested mainly due to competition in San Jose's Chinatown, Oakland's Chinatown, the Sunset District, the Geary Boulevard corridor, the Clement Street Chinatown, the Irving Street Chinatown. So Chinatown did not really have the impacts on business through the Embarcadero Freeway. It was impacted by competition. But the politicians, in order to assure reelection or support from powerful Chinatown interests, posed the idea of congressional monies and federal monies for a subway, which would build a 1.7-mile segment. In economic terms, that translates to almost $1 billion a mile, or as a news reporter on Channel 5 recently demonstrated, he took 5 steps and he said, "That's $1 million." Now, what can you get for $1 million if you put $1 million into Muni? But that we're not talking about $1 million. We're talking about $595 million of state funds and local funds, $123 million of Prop K funds, which are your sales taxes in San Francisco. What SaveMuni.com has been saying is that rather than building this little red subway, and what this project actually does, it eliminates an existing T-line loop that goes along the Embarcadero into the Market Street corridor. So the Central Subway actually takes away transit into the BART and Muni metro system that exists now and goes directly northward for very few ridership gains. The scandal, obviously, for us is that the priorities of a city that emphasizes the special interests of a small group for $1.6 billion versus the benefits for 700,000 daily riders by investing $590 million of state and local monies into the citywide muni system shouldn't even be a question mark. It should be a priority. In 2003, when the citizens of the city passed Proposition K, there were a whole series of transportation projects that were emphasized. There were indeed a small allocation of about $123 million to a central subway, but there was a whole slew of transportation projects that included transit preferential streets throughout the city and other very worthy projects like bus rapid transit on Geary Boulevard and other improvements that would have had immediate benefits for hundreds of thousands of riders. Instead, the political forces of the city, in collusion with a very few number of special interests, created a project that will benefit very few and expend most of your state and local funds and deny you, the citizenry, the benefits of a good transit system in the next year or two. And that, I think, is outrageous. Unfortunate, in any large development in the history of San Francisco or the United States or anywhere in the world, often the people who are supposedly the beneficiaries of a project are actually the ones who are worst affected. Consider the redevelopment agencies, elimination of the Western Addition districts, the Lower Fillmore, Nihon Machi, today's Parkmerced project. These projects always were touted as important to eliminate blighted areas, underserved, low economic areas, and that these projects would benefit by eliminating their neighborhoods. Well, if you look at the Western Addition now, I don't think that was a great benefit to the neighborhood or the citizenry of the city. In Chinatown, similarly, the proponents of the Central Subway are saying this is important for the Chinese American community. But in reality, if you look at the lack of connection from the Central Subway, which stops at Union Square, not Market Street, and the 1,000-foot walk that a little old lady with 3 pink plastic bags after shopping will be carrying, most people aren't going to do that. They're going to take the bus to Market Street. But in order to gain the support of nonprofits and other community groups, there's a lot of money being flowing through the regular political channels. Part of that is $8 million to the Chinatown nonprofit who will be building replacement housing for the building that is being demolished at the corner of Washington and Stockton, which displaces about 44 low-income tenants and has eliminated 8 very, very vibrant long-term small businesses. So the project that supposedly improves and helps Chinatown already has eliminated large amounts of affordable housing, good small businesses, and part of the traditional political mechanisms to accomplish that, of course, has been to provide funding to the very people who will promote the project. The same group that's receiving the $8 million for the housing is also receiving $30,000 a month as consultants to the Central Subway to get petition signatures to support the subway, to advocate at community meetings and hearings. So the methodology by which we see manufacturing of support through large sums of money, through media consultants, through public relations consultants, and obviously tremendous support from the newspapers oftentimes because they receive advertising and are connected to the business interests who benefit. So the $8 million, to answer your question, is kind of a tip of an iceberg of flow of money that creates this self-generating manufacture of support for any project of this magnitude. Okay.
Say
SaveMuni.com has been working very diligently with congressional offices. There's actually an amendment by a Republican congressman which is attempting to defund the Central Subway. The interesting aspect about this project is that the alliance is very interesting. You have progressive transit advocates in San Francisco. You have the Sierra Club linked with Tea Party Republicans in Washington. And I find that very interesting that the diversity of opposition to the subway is very wide. But it speaks to, I guess, an underlying issue that should affect all of us, and that is wasteful spending.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm Doctora Maria Rivero. I worked at Laguna Honda as a doctor for 22 years, and for those of you who may not know, Laguna Honda is a city-owned hospital. It's a long-term care hospital, basically for poor people. Most of the patients who used to come to Laguna would stay for years, decades, sometimes up to 40 years, and end their lives at Laguna Honda. The way we became whistleblowers, one of the ways we became whistleblowers was when my patients who used to go out on sightseeing bus trips, they were locked Alzheimer dementia patients who spent 24/7 indoors and never got to see the light of day outside, used to go on sightseeing bus trips every other week. And those bus trips were paid for by the Patient Gift Fund, which was a charitable trust, or is a charitable trust, established in the 50s, where generous San Franciscans would donate money so that the patients could have amenities like bus trips to go out sightseeing. And there were also resident bus trips. And in the fall of 2009, both of those were cut. And we were told by the administration of Laguna Honda that the gift fund was bankrupt. And we wondered, how could that be possible? Because many years before, when I had been in administration, I knew that the gift fund had had $2 million. And it wasn't at all clear to me how that amount of money could have been depleted in such a short period of time. So what we did was we used the Sunshine Ordinance, and we got data about the gift fund and how it was being managed. And what we found out about the gift fund was actually quite appalling and outrageous. A few years before we got the information, it turned out that the administration had established these staff funds, and they were using the gift fund and money donated for the specific use of the patients, in fact, for the staff, to have catered luncheons for administrators, to give out employee recognition awards, $50 a pop, and a little plaque thanking you for your service to Laguna Honda, and for pizza parties for the doctors. And none of the staff really knew, except the administration, that that had, in fact, been going on. So we filed a whistleblower complaint with the Comptroller's Office, and we also filed an ethics complaint about the gift fund, asking for an audit based on the things that we had found. And a few days after we filed the complaint, Dr. Kerr was issued a layoff. He was the only person in the Department of Public Health, which has like 8,000 employees, to be laid off during that round of cuts. And even going back to when we first requested information, I had been harassed by the administration. And after we went public, the hospital and the Department of Public Health started basically a campaign of character assassination, accusing us of being detractors who were attacking the hospital, and accusing us of making false statements in press releases. So at that point, we really felt like we didn't have any choice, and we went to the media. We went to the I-Team, who did an expose about the Patient Gift Fund. We also went to the neighborhood associations that surrounded Laguna Honda, which is in Twin Peaks. So the West of Twin Peaks Central Council unanimously passed a resolution requesting an audit. Sean Ellsberg, the supervisor for the district had said that there was no money for an audit, and Dr. Kerr actually went to Peg Stevenson and found that, in fact, Laguna Honda was given $400,000 for an audit of the gift fund. When the gift fund was finally audited, they returned $350,000 to the patients. They had taken money from the gift fund, like $176,000, to close a hole in a capital accounts fund, which we thought they were using to remodel offices. And they returned $350,000, which really was probably not all that they took from the gift fund. And they forced the Health Commission to become more involved in overseeing what the administration at Laguna Honda was up to with the gift fund. But unfortunately, by then, both of us had lost our employment with the city. We were both over 20-year employees. We filed a retaliation complaint with the Ethics Commission, and 2 years later, it was dismissed. And so I think that what happened to us is not that unusual. The administration that was taking money from the gift fund inappropriately is still there. They're all there. The only people who aren't there are us, the whistleblowers. So that's why we're here, and thank you for listening to us and hearing what we have to say.
Hello, my name is Dr. Derek Kerr, and I worked at Laguna Honda Hospital for 20 years, and I was also the union steward for the Doctors Union, UAPD. About the same time we noticed problems in the gift fund, we noticed that there were two contracts with conflicts of interest. One involved Health Director Dr. Mitchell Katz. He was receiving over $10,000 a year from a city contractor who was working for the health department. The second one involved Davis, Jaw and Associates, another contractor with the health department, who happened to be married to a high-level executive in the health department who was involved in awarding contracts, including to him. We reported these two conflicts to the Controller's whistleblower program because the controller oversees city contracts, and these were two tainted contracts. We thought the controller would deal with them. No, they sent them to the Ethics Commission. Then after a month, the Ethics Commission sent them to the district attorney's office. The district attorney sat on them for 9 months and finally decided that they would not press criminal charges, and then they returned our complaints to the Ethics Commission. During that time, I had been laid off, and Maria had been pressured out of Laguna Honda. So the investigations go on and on while they can sort of get rid of the troubles. Well, ethics sat on these complaints for another 14 months. And we got the feeling that the city really didn't want to investigate our complaints. So we used the Sunshine Ordinance to get public records to investigate our complaints ourselves. And we found more dirt. That forced the Controller's Office to revoke one of these contracts, a $1.2 million contract to Davis, John Associates, and recover $430,000 because the contract had been tainted. Meanwhile, we found out that the Controller's Whistleblower Program and the Ethics Commission both reported all serious complaints to the city attorney. Now, the city attorney defends city officials. So the city attorney had a conflict of interest because they're involved in investigations of whistleblower complaints, but they're also responsible for defending the city officials who are accused by the whistleblowers. You're stuck with the city attorney. Now, in terms of my layoff, my union was upset because I was a union steward. We appealed to the health department. We went to the city human resources department. We went to the mayor's office. We offered concessions to make up for my job, but we were told that my layoff was irreversible. They also said there was no money and no work to do. But Laguna Honda hired another doctor into my job, and they increased their employees. There were more staff. So there was work and there was money. Finally, after 2 years, we were able to push the Ethics Commission to come up with a decision. They dismissed our complaints and dismissed our retaliation complaints. They held a closed-door hearing with Dr. Mitchell Katz for 1 hour, but they wouldn't let us attend that hearing or answer questions. So now, and I should mention that since the Ethics Commission was founded 20 years ago, they have never sustained a whistleblower retaliation case, not one. So I'm suing the city for retaliation and for wrongful termination. It's the only recourse. So basically what we learned is that if you decide to blow the whistle on a big problem, you should get an attorney before you do it, because you will surely be retaliated against. The other thing is that city managers have a lot of empathy for their colleagues, and they will circle the wagons against anyone who criticizes management. And lastly, if you find a problem, a big problem, don't waste your time with the Controller's Whistleblower Program or with the Ethics Commission. Get an attorney and then go to the media. That's how you get attention. Thank you very much.
I think it's obvious, but I just want to say that.
See? And of course, Mitchell Katz was the director of the health department. And the medical director at the time and now is Colleen Riley. Yeah. Union of American Physicians and Dentists.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me speak here. It's amazing how often I come to these meetings with Steve, and it's the same story with different faces. It's horrifying and shocking to me that San Francisco, as a progressive city, is not behaving as a progressive city. And I just love to see former Mayor Gavin Newsom on Bill Maher touting how progressive we are and wonderful we are, and behind the scenes, all of this stuff is happening. It's shocking to me. I'm just going to speak very, very briefly. On February 18th, 2010, during a public budgetary hearing, Planning Commissioner Moore stated, quote, I hope it is not just last in, first out, because you have spent quite a bit of time in getting some very talented young people, and it's also for us together to look at where we're going as we move into the future. I hope that it is not only the younger and most recent planners who are being targeted for these layoffs, end quote. Additional quote, I'd just like to make a comment that I've seen a lot of talent in new, younger people. I've seen a lot of ability for hands-on, rising to the occasion, across disciplines and across the somewhat always implied silo thinking which happens in any organization. I'd like to at least express to the unions that there is indeed being paid attention to value for the dollar, end quote. This was during a budgetary hearing where it was determined and decided and agreed upon that 6 people at the planning department needed to be laid off. Subsequently, 5 people were fired after a long investigation pending a violation of computer use. 1 person was forced out. She was discriminated against due to health reasons, and it had nothing to do with the investigation. But subsequently, several months later, 6 people were indeed out, and so they met the layoff, but it wasn't really a layoff. They fired people. These were all people over the age of 50. These were all people who were senior staff people, right up to the zoning administrator. 2 of us have been reinstated. I am one of them. I'm now at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. 2 of us are also currently suing the city. And what I would like to see is a class action suit against the city, because this is rampant. This is It's horrifying to me, and I don't know what else to do to fight this. I went to the Civil Service Commission 5 times. They heard my case 5 times. At one point, one of the commissioners actually said, "We need to rehire her immediately." They didn't. At that point, I had already been reinstated, but the Civil Service Commission was a complete joke. I had tons of information. They kept having me come back to discuss my case, and it went absolutely nowhere. At that point, what I was asking for was not reinstatement, but a full investigation of Micki Callahan and the Human Resources Department, because they're clearly violating all of the civil service rules. They come in, they literally do whatever they want to do to personnel that speak out, and people that are not afraid to, basically hold their superiors, their supervisors, to the letter of the law. Nothing happened, it all went away, so I would like to see a class action suit, so I'm going to put out a sign-in sheet for anybody interested. I do have an attorney. I don't know if he's interested in a class action suit, but he's helping me with my case. And it would be great for as many people as possible to sign it, and I will contact everybody and see if we can't get something together against the city and county of San Francisco.
I want to talk about is, you see my shirt? So obviously, that is a travesty what's happening with Ross Mirkarimi. So that's, one of my number one issues right now. But also what I really want to talk about is what's been going on at San Francisco General with this corporation called Sodexo. So originally, San Francisco General had a contract with Sodexo to buy food. So they sold food products, but it's a huge corporation that's into all kind of things. So what we found out through our union is that what they did was that Sodexo and the city came to an agreement, even though they had a food contract, but they did not have a contract for management of the cafeteria at San Francisco General. But what they did was use that food contract, and then they slid in these consultants with the money that they were supposed to be spending for food. So we fought it. We couldn't get anywhere. We went to the mayor's office. We went to civil service. We went to the supervisors. Nothing. So what happened was now these same people have been hired on as city employees to run the cafeteria. And what bothers me the most about it is that the level of food that people get, everything has deteriorated for the patients. The employees will tell you that when they thaw out meat now, the quality of the products that they get are horrible. When they thaw out meat, you can see the red coloring of the meat in the bottom of the pans. The food that's been given to the cafeteria, sometimes things aren't at the right temperature. The food that's being given to the employees, the cost has gone up, but the quality has gone way down. Now, they started off with sushi bars and all this other stuff initially to get the contract, but now it's all deteriorated. So I just would like to invite everybody to go out to San Francisco General and try that food. And you tell me that the city should be spending millions of dollars with Sodexo to provide that quality of care. Mm-hmm. Sodexo is a huge corporation that sells food to a lot of businesses and restaurants.
No, I'm very familiar with
Right,
Sodexo
okay.
because they bought their contracts from Marriott Corporation.
Right.
And when Marriott had food services out to schools and hospitals or healthcare facilities, the quality was better. But under Sodexo, not just at San Francisco General, but in many states, Sodexo does not have the high standards that Marriott created with the contract services that they have.
Yeah, you're right. And so what I say is that we're going to start a campaign to try to get Sodexo out of San Francisco General. We know it's going to be difficult, but we're going to try.
It seems to me Laguna Honda obviously has food service, and they get a special pricing.
Decided to spend this money with Sodexo and to keep Sodexo running the cafeteria and the food services at San Francisco General.
How do you spell that, Sodexo?
Sadexo. Sodexo. Apartments with mother, daughter, brother, and one of them is the manager. There's all kind of corruption that's going on within hiring, which goes to her point, right?
Every time I call Human Resources, nobody knows anything. Let me go ask. I mean, even the most simple things. They hire people in Human Resources that literally cannot make good in English on the phone. I mean, that's like a basic requirement.
Recently was that one of the people that was working in resources and that was about to give a lady a 5-day suspension was a 9910. Not a trained human resources person, but human resources sent that person into a grievance meeting for an employee and behaved horribly. And now that person got kicked out, but that's only because it was discovered that this was a 9910. Now that is not a human resources specialist, and these are the kind of people that they're bringing in to run the human resources department.
You know, we get applications that come directly to our reception area. They don't go through.
They don't go to human resources anymore. It's strictly up to the manager. They look at the application. I want this one. I don't want that one.
They don't have to hire the civil service. They don't.
So they're totally evading civil service rules. They are.
Yes, this is a story as do as we say, not as we do. It's going to be a story about Micki Callahan, but I couldn't. One of the people there's always a thread between us, and one of the people that Cecilia mentioned, the person who was ill, is now at Laguna Honda. And yes, and I think it's a blessing that she got a bed there. But sometimes what gets done to somebody on a job puts them over the edge as far as health, and it did for her. Anyway, this is also about Proposition C, which was on the ballot, as Brendan knows, November 2011. Denise, it was called pension reform, but a friend of ours, Denise Deanne, called it pension deform. That was her favorite way of describing it. Retirees such as myself had been excluded from the union discussions about this measure, and groups that I belong to as far as retirees, including one called Protect Our Benefits, strongly opposed this measure, particularly the part that changed the representation on the Health Services Board from 4 employees representatives to 3 employee representatives. That may look minor, but that put 4 city-appointed, mayor-appointed people in control of the Health Services Commission. And the Health Services Commission oversees the health benefits for city employees, very, very important to city employees. So this measure was cooked up. The other part of the measure that the retirees particularly opposed was virtually eliminating some cost of living provisions. Not that these pensions are as palatial as some would think, and that over time inflation really does put inroads into modest pensions. And of course it changed the formulas for various things in ways that were inequitable. We believed were very inequitable to active employees as well. So I was interested when I saw a flyer from the Raoul Wallenberg Jewish Democratic Club, and it featured solely Micki Callahan as a speaker to explain the virtues of this Prop C. And so I I admit I went with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to see what she was going to say and to see how true it was. And there was only really one other person of my persuasion there, and she was from the United Educators, and a wise person who knew what was what. So I went to the meeting, and I was sort of appalled. Not only, I was familiar with the directives to city employees that you don't use city resources to make political pitches about things that are on the ballot. Well, she handed out this lovely colored flyer. You can see the little city seal down here. Wonder who produced this? Her deputy also, Jennifer Johnson, is married to Supervisor Ellsburn, who was one of the chief proponents of and I'm sure that Jennifer assisted Micki Callahan in developing the pitch that she made. What was appalling to me about the pitch was she used some, I guess the city rules are if you are giving objective and unbiased information about a ballot measure, that's okay. But I want to tell you what she said. She said the reason that they needed to have more city presence and more city control of that board is that the board had been so bad that it had disallowed and it had discouraged use of generic drugs for people in their health plans. And she alleged that millions of dollars was wasted because these employee representatives only wanted employees to get the non-generic drugs, and that was an example of why the city had to reassert control and have a majority on the Health Services Board. Well, my friend from the United Educators knew of the battle that had gone on at the Health Services Commission, exactly the opposite, where it had been employee groups and the employee representatives on that board who fought for and pioneered the use of generic drugs, saving millions and millions of dollars. In fact, I have a statement from Catherine Dodd, who is the director for Health Services, to that effect, that nationally they're recognized, we're recognized in San Francisco as pioneering the use of generic drugs at savings for us all as far as health benefits, as far as city employees. So I was sort of appalled by this, and I decided to file a complaint with one of those groups that we've talked about today, with the Ethics Commission, because it was a violation of the city attorney's directives about what you can do as far as political campaigning. Well, of course, here's the letter rejecting my appeal. And they said, well, she didn't actually say vote for the measure. She may have said all the reasons, but the reason why it was okay is she never directly said vote for the measure. And the other reason it was okay is apparently because a few people in the audience, the United Educated person and myself, raised questions. The opposite views were presented, so therefore it was objective. And I actually have this letter denying the appeal. So Steve asked me to submit these artifacts to the toward this effort. It's only a small story, but I think it's representative of this is the Director of Human Resources, and that.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you here today, and thank you, Steve. My name is Lynn Gavin, and I'm also a minister, but I echo the statements that Ross has said previously, and he was just so on target, I think, because what I really think has happened in regards to Ross's case has been a carefully orchestrated, designed to hide organized crime is what we're dealing with here in the city. Because my Sunshine case 11048, which you can Google, and other documents will come up, occurred before Ross even filed his filing papers to run for likely, unless you filed them before May. So on December the 24th, 2011, 4 supervisors during the Land Use Committee, they broke the law. The case is beyond a Sunshine case. They broke state law. And coincidentally, the way our Sunshine laws are written, if you, fortunately for us, correlate with state law. So if you break a Sunshine law, you've automatically broken a state law, and thus you are in violation of the city charter, which is the fundamental law for all of us. So in essence, they have 3 strikes. And they don't realize it because they won't go to their training. So they've committed 3 strikes. And also I would like to say, before I forget, I have filed a complaint with the attorneys involved in this case with the California Bar Association, because I want them gone. They have violated not just my rights, they have violated the rights of all the people in San Francisco. In addition, as of this week, I have filed a complaint against all of the attorneys on the Ethics Commission, because I am also going to sue the Ethics Department for discriminating against me as a black woman who has disabilities. My case came way before Ross, and a decision was issued way before the alleged incident with Ross and his wife. So all of those attorneys, they have a bar complaint against them as of Thursday this week. In addition to that, I'm going to look into this not being able to speak during this serious trial, because as a person with disabilities, they are violating my federal rights. I have no reasonable accommodation. What I cannot make it to every day a hearing is held for Ross, and as a citizen of the United States, I have a First Amendment right. I'm addressed that also. In addition, I have filed a complaint against City Attorney Dennis Herrera with the State Bar using my case and other sunshine violations. So if you want to also help Ross, help yourself, and you can file a complaint, because they're not just violating our rights, they're violating his rights and other people who had cases that were ahead of mine that should have been heard. Now, because of Ross's case, they're not talking about anything else. I am not a lawyer, but I do not understand how they can go forward with the board when you have Scott Wiener, David Chu, who are current with the bar, who are in violation for official misconduct, was the determination that was issued from Sunshine, referred to the district attorney's office 90 days ago. He's never responded to a letter I wrote that I sent certified that somebody got in that office. The mayor never responded. I mean, my goodness, I have nearly 150 communications that have gone out regarding my case, but it's a well-documented case beyond what Sunshine has done. Also, so I'm going to go back to the case. It's a procedural move pertaining to our rights in public meetings. So they changed the contract at the last minute and violated the law. But 12 days before they signed the development agreement, they received a letter from the civil grand jury who was looking at this development agreement that said they were about to violate the rights of citizens, our state rights as tenants. I suspect this frightened them, and it set off a flurry of activity, because they Parkmerced met with a former Supreme Court Justice. Cruz Reynoso is his name. And they kind of tweaked the development agreement again. But they missed that important deadline of 72 hours, kind of like the movie 48 Hours. They missed our 72 hours working on this. And I think it's so telling, because David Chu is on the videotape saying that he worked on it all weekend. Well, the cutoff date was Friday, and the meeting was that Tuesday. And the attorney who wrote the development agreement, Charles Russell Sullivan, because I filed a complaint against him, he gets frustrated and he says, I worked on it all night long. But Charles, you're standing with the bar. You are a sworn officer of the court. You have sworn to uphold the Constitution of California, the Constitution of the United States, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You have broken the law working on this document the night before. I don't need to tell him that. He's an attorney, and I'm going to make him accountable for what he did. In addition, it's scathing it's really daunting and indescribable to see elected officials violate your right as a human being. And so David Campos was the only one at the Board of Supervisors meeting who said, I think we may be violating the Brown law. And he asked Cheryl Susanna, yes, violation with State Bar. I filed. Do you have case law for what we are doing? And she says, no. She says no. So, and they go ahead and sign it anyway. But also, it's interesting because they've been doing this for so long, violating all of our rights, but somebody has caught them on the hook, and now they're on the run. A year ago, they wouldn't answer any letter I wrote them. But up until recently, within the last 2 months, when I end my letters to them, I tell them that they have violated my rights as a Black woman and as a person with disabilities in combination and collusions with elected officials at City Hall and city employees. You have committed the RICO Act, and I'm filing in federal court against you. Now everybody's answering me. Everybody's answering me. And Micki Callahan tried to tell me there was another case that was 3 hours with Sunshine, case 11068. 5 of the planning department employees, including the executive director, were found in violation of Sunshine because they would not release any documents to me so that I could defend myself. The very first day, Micki Callahan said they had done anything wrong. And I sent her a copy of the Sunshine complaint. So I wrote her back and CC'd it to Dennis Five Aces Herrera. I said, you're a lawyer? As a friend of mine says, lawyer. I said, if you're not a lawyer, I don't think it's legal for you to be giving legal advice. It's against the law. Or do you work for the city attorney's office? Because, see, Micki is going to be one of the defendants in my case because she's trying to tell me the planning department did nothing wrong. That's not for her to decide. Sunshine has decided that. So another interesting thing in the development agreement is Carmen Chu, because her district got $50,000 for a project, and she did not disclose that in the final vote for the people, the residents here in San Francisco, and she didn't recuse herself. The memo was not on the agenda. Now, the project had already gotten nearly $1 million for a crosswalk with APG and any middle school. That's in the sunset. That has nothing to do with the Parkmerced development agreement, because I'm not a lawyer, but how is it she's voting on a proposal they very much want? It's worth over $1 billion. And they've given her district something that has been put at the very end. It didn't even exist Friday when they voted Tuesday. The memo wasn't even there in the pack. I can verify it. How can she vote? And yes, she is in her office is in communications about this money, I should say. I've got her on the run. She keeps committing obstruction of justice. So, that there's this money going to her district that her office is aware of. She does not disclose this. It's a conflict of interest because the crosswalk has nothing to do with Parkmerced anyway. If they want to give it, they can give it, but why does it need to be with their proposal, and all they need is 6 votes? Everyone all ran out and said, oh, David Chu, he was the swing vote. Carmen Chu, in my opinion, was the 6th vote. She was the swing vote. Michael Yarney, project manager 1 with Office of Economic Workforce Development, who was the project manager for Parkmerced, he's intricately involved with this money. He no longer is working with that department anymore. They've kept trying to hide him. And it's all in the documents because an employee did their job and gave me documents that will implicate many people in court. So I think what has happened because of this, and the possibility that 4 elected supervisors may have to be removed from office, they have gone after Ross to not talk about my case. And and so there's more to this picture. There's so much more. They've called attention on themselves, and I truly am afraid for my safety. I'm very concerned about my children who are away at college because a lot of money is involved. And I think it is the magnitude of Serpico once everything has been unveiled. And so how can they not tell you that? They can talk about Ross every day, making people tired. And then when, I didn't even bother to read it, but talking about the paintings in his house, I mean, my God, I never thought a paper would go below the standards of a National Enquirer. We would be better off now reading the National Enquirer because they would at least do some investigation, because I asked Rachel Gordon, why is she not going to report a possible violation of the First Amendment right when they said you can't make any public comments until the very end? I said, and I mean, even high school students know this stuff. We're talking about real journalists, but more importantly, we're talking about real crime here in our city, and we're talking about organized crime. A year ago, I couldn't have even had this speech, but to live through it and think about it, because the very first, my case 11048 had 2 hearings. The first one was with Marcus. He's chairperson of land use. He should have never allowed David Chu to introduce the phantom 14 pages. And the next day, I had a 3-day notice on my door. And I'm still fighting a retaliation eviction, not for rent. They're trying to get me out of there because one of the things that they said, the commissioners explained, we have grounds to go and file in court, and management for Parkmerced was there. And then finally, I want to say, Sunshine was disbanded, I think, because of my case. Because on March 13th, it was referred to the district attorney's office, who's never responded. We're at the end of June. And ethics. On March 14th, their positions were posted, and they were all fired but one person. It is unethical for Scott Wiener, David Chu, Malia Corn, who had been found in violation of the Sunshine Commission, to vote to remove them. They needed to have disclosed that to the residents and chambers that day and recused themselves from the vote. Scott David Wiener is his name. I filed on David Chu, Scott Wiener, Cheryl Susanna Adams, Charles Russell, Dennis Vivaces, and Eric. I have filed with the bar on all of them. And so what happened was it was just disheartening to see them fire commissioners who had done their job. And that is what they did. Wiener led the charge. He led the charge to get rid of Sunshine. And when you see the tape of one of his aides belittling the Sunshine Commission, it is unbelievable. I'm glad I have it on tape. Because she represented how he thinks. And that is why I say how she belittles them. You don't tell us what to do. You don't tell the Sunshine Commissioners how to vote. And so Commissioner Wolf says, well, do you know what sunshine is? And it is the supreme law locally. It takes precedence in terms of our rights to access public records so that we can have open government, so that we can question authority. And this is a part of me at times that gets very angry, because here we have soldiers dying every day abroad for democracy, and they're trying to take ours away from us, and I just can't let that go unchallenged. So I'm filing on all of them, and I have asked the United States Justice Department to come in and look at my case, because I have federal rights that I do believe have been violated. payment of utilities, meaning water, sewer, and garbage. Now, everybody in Parkmerced does not pay. It's mainly the people, I think, within the last 5 years. But I think for some of the people, a large percentage of the people are subsidized. And I think that is a new concept. Third-party billing is a new concept for them in terms they didn't get any type of training on what that was because they're subsidized, so they know how much rent they're supposed to pay, and they pay that. And then they send this billing statement, which is really Parkmerced, and rent commissioners consider it an illegal rent increase. But I think what they did, they came up with a strategy for constructive eviction. So on an ongoing basis, it doesn't look suspicious. Oh, these tenants are subsidized and they don't want to pay their rent. But when you look at the whole picture, because they're subsidized, they are taking money from the federal government for these tenants up until they actually are gone. And I have contacted HUD about that. Out here on the West Coast, they were dismissive of me. So because of all this work that I've accumulated, fortunately I did watch Nancy Drew as a kid. So I contacted the Secretary of HUD, Sean Donovan, and filed a complaint. Within 3 days, an investigator has been issued looking into that case. Because now we're talking about federal money and fraud. And that is what I think they're really doing. They're taking federal money when they never intended for the people to stay there anyway. So it's just really phenomenal, the levels of all of this corruption that's going on. I gave someone information with the Examiner. He hung up on me. Yes, he did. A reporter. And as you can see, no one's from the Chronicle has ever talked about the story. So I've reached out to black newspapers across the country because my story is more important than Ross, in a sense. I want Ross to have his job. He was elected. But we're talking about the homes of nearly 4,000 people here.